All right, buddy, you ready to get this thing started?
Kevin Durant and Kyrie. I just
Okay, hold on.
oh,
Pull yourself together. We'll do the theme music, and then we'll get this thing started.
okay.
Welcome to We Got Nets, a podcast about Brooklyn's finest. Here are your hosts, Adam Armbrecht and Doug Norrie.
All right, welcome back to the We Got Nets podcast. It's a podcast all about your beloved Brooklyn Nets, who we all might love just a little bit more on Monday. I'm Doug Norrie. That breathless voice you heard to open the podcast is Adam Armbrecht.
I'm okay now.
And I dare say, you're okay? You pull yourself together? Because we're gonna need to. We talked earlier on an earlier podcast about hosing you off just on the idea that like the news around this stuff might happen. Now we are actually in a space where it's actually happened. So if you're gonna need to collect yourself, we did this about 12 to 15 hours after free agency, which I thought was gonna be enough time to collect our emotions. But do you feel like you're fully collected? And then we're gonna get into some of the stuff that broke down on Sunday.
I'm heading over to the local car wash where they, the group of guys come out with all the towels and they really give that hard dry off. That's pretty much where I'm at these days. But I'm gonna keep it together for the podcast and let's dive in.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't think anyone, if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan, you probably don't need to be reminded of this or to be brought up to speed on this after what was probably the craziest day of NBA player movement, maybe in history. And the best player didn't even arguably the best player has not even landed on a team yet, and that's Kawhi Leonard. But Sunday, the news comes out, Woj bombing at about, I want to say like 3 p.m. Eastern, that after Kevin Durant had made an announcement that he was going to announce on his Instagram media site, his announcement, Adrian Wojnarowski breaks that Kevin Durant is in fact going to sign with the Brooklyn Nets following Kyrie Irving. And they essentially, the plan for Brooklyn had been to bring in the two superstars in the offseason. And Sean Marks and company did it, dude. It's kind of unbelievable. They did one of the most miraculous franchise turnarounds in 3 years. So Durant signs for 4 years. Kyrie signs for 4 years. We'll get into what all this means. We had speculated on the other podcast. You and I were furiously texting each other yesterday during the day as news was sort of leaking and sort of running up and building up to Durant's gonna message. He's gonna go on Instagram. What do you think that means? Would he do that if he was coming to the Nets? Like just like the speculation around it.
He's going to the boardroom.
Yeah, the board. I mean, oh, dude, I got to tell you, the boardroom had it. The second best day that anyone had yesterday was the boardroom's Instagram person, because that thing went from 20,000 followers to 100,000 in like 20 minutes or something like that. Like every refresh that I was doing was just adding 10,000 new followers to an Instagram account. So where do we stay? I mean, in terms of look, we came to this podcast with you as the fan and me sort of more as the basketball person, and we're probably going to round into, evening out both of those roles as time goes on. But you're the Nets fan. Sean Marks pulls it off. Can you even 3 years ago, did you think anything like this was even possible? There's been positivity around the franchise, but nothing like this.
No, and no, this was not the expectation 3 years. When he took over, I think it was just that idea of coming from a great organization. We've talked about this, coming from the Spurs. Great, come in, bring stability to this organization. Let's go ahead and get ourselves back on track. Let's be a respectable team in the league. Let's not be the afterthought. And you make the moves. You bring in some bloated contracts from other teams, and you can see the trajectory that they're on where, we want to get to a place where we have money to spend on free agents. But 3 years ago, there's no way that you could project that you'd be at this offseason where Kyrie had left Cleveland, gone to Boston, not liked it there, where KD had been on the Warriors and then is in the market to move. Because the Knicks were so much of the conversation when it came to KD after Golden State, whenever that time came. So much of this is just kind of a whirlwind of it. And you were saying the amount of news that was coming out yesterday.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and even when they were like, oh, now, Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant have talked about maybe teaming up. All of a sudden, like in that witching hour where you were like, maybe it's not going to be the Nets' time to shine here. And it all came together. And and you can tell because I'm stuttering over my words more than I have on any podcast so far. It really is just like, oh, we just signed 2 of the top 7-8 players in the league. Like they're on the roster. It's incredible.
It's not going to come without its question marks here, so we're going to get into that a little bit as well. But just as a Nets sort of macro top-down view of what's happened here, look, you need to get yourself into a spot like this, you need to have combinations of being very good and very lucky. Like the Nets have also been very lucky along this path. It's fine. Every team to get like this has to be lucky, right? Like the Warriors to get to where they were had to get lucky enough to Steph Curry to fall to them, right? Like in the draft, and get lucky enough to get kind of just like hitting a guy like Draymond and then open themselves up to having Durant. So I'm not saying luck is not a bad thing, but you give yourself more chances to be lucky when you're good. Right. And that's the real piece of luck, is that it looks like sometimes it can look like luck that all the pieces fell into place, but when you just give yourself opportunity after opportunity to get lucky, eventually, and you're just smart and have a process that just makes sense, and the Nets clearly have that, and they stuck the course. This is the trust. This is the old Sixers trust the process thing, right? This is the process. Right. The process is do everything you can do, and when the pieces open up for you to go for it, you effing go for it, right? Like that's it. That's it. You don't like keep middling around. You wait till when Kevin Durant's there, you go sign him, and you say, I get that he has some question marks around him. So right. Very impressive, just the whole thing. Like I said, it is a little hard to sum up the amount of player movement that happened on Sunday because it was just an unbelievable amount. We can get into where the Nets stand. And actually, let's just talk about this because I think that maybe it's sometimes lost in the Sunday exuberance dance in the street Nets fans that just were like Nets Twitter yesterday, which I've become fully engrossed in. Nets Twitter, Nets Reddit over the last few months was just having the equivalent of like burn the couches because we just won the championship in the streets moments. It was just unbelievable. But do you think it's maybe forgotten on some people that Durant's just like not going to play for a year and is coming off a devastating injury? I'm not poo-pooing the signing. I love it. I'm just saying, does it seem like that was also sort of in the moment forgotten? Because this guy, we're not going to see this guy for a year. We're not going to see the best version or whatever is going to end up being the best version of him for maybe a year plus. Do you think Nets fans have fully taken into account that piece of information? Because I'm not totally sure everyone's on board with that one yet.
Yeah, and that's, I don't want to say like to the casual fan, but like most of the fan base, you get the signing and I'm taking my shirt off, I'm out in the street, I'm waving it like a towel, and that's great, and you should be excited about it. But, and it's not to deflate this excitement right after the day of free agency, you do have to realize that what the Nets have done here is set themselves up that over the length of these contracts, the next 4 seasons, the goal is going to be to win that championship. I would say, you want to be challenging next year once Kevin Durant comes back. You want to be getting to that conference final and pushing to get to the finals. And probably that third and fourth year are going to be the big years for the moves that were made in this free agency period. So you do have to temper it a little bit with expectations. This upcoming season is going to be about Kyrie, acclimating into this team, building his relationships with the players that are on the roster. You talked about this, Karis LeVert coming back 100% healthy for a full season. So there's a lot of parts that you're going to want to see these things develop. It's going to probably feel a little bit like last year where you saw guys starting to click with one another. And we can get a little bit into expectations for the upcoming season. But yes, you do have to take a step back, take that deep breath as I've been trying to do, and say, okay, remember, Kevin Durant, we're looking at 2020, 2021, where you want to see him back healthy, find out what he is post-injury, which we assume is still going to be a great player, and then go from there. So, try to control yourselves, Nets fans, I would say. And like you said, I am the pure Nets fan, and I'm having a hard time, but I do want to be excited and know that this is a process for them, and it's a good process to be a part of.
Yeah, so because you look at the contract is 4 for $164, but it's really 3 for $164. Mm-hmm. Because it just really shouldn't. Like the Achilles injury is a 10 to 12 month recovery period, with the idea that even at that 12-month mark, you are not 100%. Mm-hmm. That's just the way this works. It's just and this, of all the NBA related leg injuries you can have, this is the one that's sort of people know the least about. Like you tear your ACL now, it's like, I don't know, it's like going to the grocery store and picking up produce. It's like, I'll just get a new ACL. I don't need to. I'm out of apples. I'll just go get some more.
I buy my ACLs in bulk. That's how I shop.
Exactly. Like I get my ACLs at Costco. I just like these ACL, MCL. You get them at a discount when you buy 2 for 1. So these things are not. Those injuries are sort of known. They have very definitive timelines and very definitive recovery periods, and most players recover from those injuries well. Mm-hmm. ACL is different. The history on it is mixed, and so excuse me, the Achilles. I said the ACL. The Achilles is mixed. So, look, I'm not trying to chuck water onto everyone here. I love it. I was as excited as anyone could be seeing these things, mostly because I was like, we started a We Got Nets podcast the year they got Durant. I can't believe it.
Right.
It's just, in the old better to be lucky than good thing. Just keep throwing shots out there. So, anyway, I think you do speak for the Nets fans when you say it is kind of hard in the moment to remember. Now, they also, obviously, the Kyrie news was sort of known going in that he was their main target. Mm-hmm. It looks for all the world like, well, the biggest joke in the world is that like these moratorium periods around when people can talk to each other, because the NBA did some crazy telepathic communication between all their players yesterday that every single dude was signed before the time where you could even sign the contract.
As Woj is using his social media accounts, he's just like, yeah, you want to know about contracts? Here's 30, from between 2 and 3 p.m.
Well, it's crazy. Like they're like, and it's noon. Everyone start talking. It's like it's 5 minutes later. Everyone signed. It's just like crazy the amount. But it does for all the world look like that Durant, Kyrie, and DeAndre Jordan as well had sort of worked this out, and they did a good job of keeping a lid on it as well, because I mentioned the Jordan piece, the DeAndre piece, as the part where it was clear that this had been the plan, because they were even prepared to leave some money, they being Kyrie and KD. It just kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? You're gonna get. How happy are you about saying Kyrie and KD going forward? Does it feel like you named your kids and you just pulled it off perfectly when you named them?
Well,
correctly?
Did
you feel?
And it's Kyrie to KD buckets. Like you can slide those right off, no problem.
I'll get bad news. Kyrie doesn't really pass that much, but so I don't know if we're gonna go. So I don't know how often we're gonna get that. But then DeAndre Jordan comes in for the 4 for $40 million, with the news that the Durant and Irving had both left some of their money for him to be able to take that contract. So, I mean, would you agree that this had all been sort of been worked out through text and maybe a few slide dinners here and there, that this situation was known maybe for weeks at this point? I'm not sure if the injury was the thing that ultimately galvanized it, but it really feels like these dudes had this worked out, well in advance.
Yeah, and it's curious. I don't have to worry about it now because the injury did happen, but I would be so curious to know where these conversations would have been if Durant hadn't been injured and it was just kind of an open court. Now, you'd assume other teams that maybe had max spots were going to come after Durant. I mean, I guess it seems only logical that the Knicks would be the one team that said, we have reservations about offering a max contract to KD.
Well, do you think, I didn't want to turn this into a Knicks thing early, because it's so, it's crazy, the amount of, I'm almost going to save the Knicks reaction piece, but like the only piece is they're probably, if their thing was true, that they had reservations about signing him to a long-term deal, then you have to assume other teams did as well, though I don't think there was really many other teams in the running here. I think it was sort of New York. I'm grouping the two New York teams together, and Golden State or bust. I don't think he was going anywhere else.
No, anyway, to your point, yes, all indications seem like Kyrie and KD were communicating for quite a bit of time, and the fact that KD is close with DeAndre Jordan as well, it seemed like this is what they were progressing towards. And to piggyback onto that, we were talking that idea of fan expectations, knowing that Durant's not going to be there for this year. As much as I can go back and forth about, and you've talked about it, what DeAndre Jordan is at this point of his career, what you can expect from him, making the extra room to be able to bring him in actually it becomes a really important piece to this, because that means that he is going to be here this first year when Durant isn't, and that's going to help this team be further along than if you just had Kyrie and you're waiting for Durant the following year. So making this space and accommodating Jordan for what ends up being $10 million a year over 4 years, that's a big move, and that's, I think, something that can be overlooked. And I just also have to say, because we are so focused on Durant because we've known about Kyrie, but hey, it's a big deal that Kyrie is here as well. This is a big team up all together, and I think I was kind of just going back and reminiscing over highlights of Kyrie's career and just reminding myself how talented he is and the difference between him and D'Angelo Russell and what that's going to look like. I mean, this is a big upgrade. As fond as I was of Russell, this is a massive upgrade at the point guard position, and that's it can't be understated how big that is.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of times with the NBA, you need to look at moves cumulatively too, right? Like just bringing Kyrie alone, that would not be a move I was all that excited about. The upgrade, I'm with you that it's an upgrade from Russell. We can get into semantics about how big of an upgrade it is or not.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you need if the only way you're going to get Durant was to have Kyrie, or if the only way you're going to get Kyrie and Durant was to get DeAndre, if like, you see where I'm going in the spider web out of thought process here, like then cumulatively you take all of it together and say you have to like it, because 4 for 40, like if DeAndre Jordan signs 4 for 40 for the Knicks, like you need to burn Madison Square Garden to the ground. Like that's an awful, that's just an incredible, and that's your big signing, and then that's where you kind of go to media day with, where you call your season ticket holders and say, look what we did. It's just it's all over. But
it'd be like signing Julius Randle to a $63 million contract if you're the Knicks. That'd just be absurd.
It's too easy to chuck the Knicks in the dumpster. Yeah, that is really. That one might not end up looking that bad. The DeAndre Jordan, the 4 for 40 on DeAndre in a vacuum is not a good contract. But like I said, if he's their boy and that's the way you're going to get him here, then you just have to. That has to be part of the small print on the contract. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. By the way, as I'm saying this, my other business partner James just texted me something about DeAndre Jordan. It said DeAndre Jordan is going to be good with the Nets. Picture surge on Toronto, blah, and then he goes on. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think DeAndre's role. It's funny that DeAndre Jordan's occupying the mental space of everyone that I work with. But I think that he's going to be a backup. I don't think he's going to start. I think he's going to be a backup center. And one very interesting thing that's happened. So I was texting. I can't remember if you and I were texting about this last night or maybe I was texting so many different people about basketball last night. But there's such a new world order in the NBA right now. For years, the way to win at basketball was to figure out how to beat the Warriors. Okay? Like that was it. That's been like the last 6 or 7 years.
Right.
That's just not the case anymore. And you can see teams kind of taking this into mind because they're just not doing a conventional they're not putting their teams together in the way that's been done over the last 5 or 6 years to the point where some teams are just going ultra big. Like we're seeing Philly just signed Al Horford to play alongside Embiid, right? Yeah. The Lopez brothers are teaming back up in Milwaukee. They have double centers. JaVale McGee, they said he's going to sign with the Pistons and to be with Andre Drummond. Some of these teams are just going super big. So I don't think they're going to play Allen and DeAndre together, but it is interesting that the centers might not be having lots of centers might not be the dirge on your roster like it was before. So I mean, I don't think he's going to start, right? Do you? I think they're going to keep Jared Allen starting. I absolutely do not think they can start them together. I think that would be pretty bad. But
no,
but I mean, do you think DeAndre comes in off the bench?
Yeah, I was fishing around just to see, what are the projected lineups for the upcoming season, and I stopped once I had gone to a few different spots and seen that everyone was coming up with a lot of different stuff, including some ones I had to throw out because they were putting whoever it was. Let's say Prince is in the starting lineup. It's like, okay, these guys are off track here, but. No, I don't think that they'll start side by side because the deficiencies of both of them or what their skill sets are, I don't think play well together at the same time for the most part. The positive thing from a Nets standpoint though is regardless of, and we had talked about when Russell was on the team last year and how they were limiting his minutes, and that could be a product of who he was as a player, but they are a team that believes in balance in terms of workload. So I think that Jared Allen now is going to be in his 3rd season. You don't make him the backup center to DeAndre Jordan going into his 3rd year. The Nets are high on him. So, but I do think you'll see them play similar amount of minutes potentially. So it may just be for aesthetics that Jared Allen starts at center, and then depending on the flow of the game, you bring in DeAndre Jordan for a physical presence when you feel like the Embiids of the world are maybe grinding you a little bit underneath the basket. So it's going to be that give and take. But no, I assume that he does come in off the bench and you look to get X number of quality minutes out of him. And that's what you saw last year from this roster as well, though. It's just that they're going to spread it out. Even with Kyrie now and DeAndre Jordan, Spencer Dinwiddie, I think, is going to see his role expand now, and he'll be on the court more. Again, LeVert healthy. You're going to see him on the court more frequently as well. So you're going to still see that balance, though, I assume, even with DeAndre Jordan. But you'll just quickly footnote that having DeAndre Jordan, again, in this package of players, what's nice about it is, what does it give you that you didn't have? A physicality on that defensive end, and even underneath the boards offensively. And so that is a nice addition whenever you decide to insert him into the game.
Yeah, and I think the starting lineup, if I were to guess right now, is going to be something like Kyrie, Harris, Prince, LeVert. I'm not going in order by. I started with point guard, but I'm not going in that order. It's Kyrie, LeVert, Harris, Prince, and then Jared Allen. Prince is not small. He's 6'8". He's big. He size wise in terms of like just overall build, he's going to have trouble playing at the 4. I think a little bit in some matchups. The Nets are still going to struggle at the power forward position, I think, especially on defense. That's what happens when you sign a max power forward, because KD I know he's listed as a small forward, but he's essentially a power forward in today's game, even trending up the center at times, depending on some lineups. But let's just call him a power forward, a stretch 4. He's essentially your power forward, and he is going to be on the bench for the year. So I think they're still going to have struggle with some interior defense stuff. The power forward for this season has not really been addressed, though again they have some size. I wouldn't be shocked if you saw Jared Allen's 3-point attempts range up and over 1 this season, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he was up to more than half a 3-pointer per game last year.
Well,
he's a good enough free throw shooter. Good.
No, and just a footnote to that is, and I know you knock his, not just you, but I mean in general, the knock on his game is doesn't have a perimeter shot. Remember that Brook Lopez, who is now in Milwaukee and has that outside shot, he started developing that his last year when he was in Brooklyn before they traded him to LA. They pushed, you could look back and see that his 3-point shots went up drastically when Kenny Atkinson came in. So this is a coaching staff that I think can bring that out of Jared Allen and expand that game a little bit, which will be huge in terms of that presence, because you're not anticipating DeAndre Jordan developing a shot like that at this stage of his career.
Yeah, so yeah, right. And so you did see, right, exactly. It was Brook Lopez's last year in Brooklyn where he went he basically went up from 0 threes, then he went up to 5 per game, and then he went over to Lakers and then went to Milwaukee. So he went from 0 to 5. And by the way, a good comp for how well you're going to, I don't know if we talked about this or my other podcast, a good comp for how well you can sometimes project to be a 3-point shooter is how well you shoot free throws. Like that's how teams will typically make the jump between college and the pros, is to try to figure it out, because the college 3-point line isn't usually a good comp, but what is a good comp is if you have the process and the repeatable motion around free throws that you can move it out. And Allen's like a 75% free throw shooter, which is right around what Brook Lopez was when he started shooting threes. Brook Lopez was 80%, which is to say, like, this is not a bottom of the barrel. He's not just one of these bottom of the barrel just free throw shooters. He can make free throws. And so when that's the case, it's not a huge leap to say, I'm going to take 3 steps back, and now I'm going to try to turn these in. And he's not going to turn into a volume 3-point shooter like Brook Lopez was, but 1.2 per game. So if you saw that this season, knowing and trying to get him and DeAndre some minutes together, I don't think that's a crazy leap to see something like that happen. Because, like, for instance, when they play Philly, and Philly's starting Horford and Embiid, maybe you just see them start together. I don't know. Philly's a huge team now. So this is the NBA is so crazy, man. Like we could dive crazy into all these scenarios. And we're going to, as we break down every game during the season, about all these crazy scenarios that you're going to see, because there is something of a new world order when it comes to just, I think, how teams are going to try to start structuring their teams. I don't think there's going to be any one totally correct way to do it anymore, which was before the way to beat the Warriors.
Yeah.
Real quick, do you know who the old besides the 3 guys they signed yesterday? Do you know who the oldest player on the Nets is?
Well, now I think I may have a tip in here. Would it be Joe Harris?
It is Joe Harris, 27 years old. Zach Lowe from ESPN wrote a really long piece this morning, which he probably stayed up all night writing this, but about just like the Nets rebuild. And the reminder was that outside of the DeAndre, Kyrie, KD thing, Joe Harris at 27 is now the oldest player from that group that's come in. This is still an incredibly young core of players. For as much as Kyrie and KD are trending into their primes, or maybe on the peak of their primes, with maybe on the way down, but not a precipitous drop. This is still a very, very young team of players.
Yeah, and I think the other, I was just reading, and I'd love to cite it, but I won't know because I've been diving on so many different articles. But there are 0, after Rondé Hollis-Jefferson left in free agency, there are 0 remaining players from the 2015-2016 roster for the Nets, which is when Marks came in and the organization turned over. So you've seen they've come in, they've turned this roster over, and to your point, they still have Jared Allen, Kurucs, Musa, even Karis LeVert is on the young side. Spencer Dinwiddie's only 26. Those aren't Dinwiddie not being a draft pick, but a player they brought in. Harris, also a guy they brought in after he was left on the scrap heap essentially around the league. So yeah, behind these the big three, I'll call them now, and then Joe Harris, still a very young core. Which to go macro for a second on this, you bring in these players on 4-year contracts. The goal is going to be to win a championship. In that, like we said, probably the the third year most likely is the goal for a championship. The nice thing about it is you're going to have some of these young players. They're going to continue to grow over these next 3-4 seasons, and you'll be in another position where cap room will become available, and you'll be able to look at who are the guys that we want to lock in and give those big contracts again. So I think there's something very systematic about the Brooklyn Nets approach. This, again, you go out, you make the big splash, but it's still about long-term growth and stability for this team going forward. This isn't hey, let's win a championship over the next three or four seasons, and then who cares, So I think that's also a positive thing to have in the back of your mind as a Nets fan.
Yeah, and this team, like you said, might get expensive later on, something you worry about later, like when LeVert comes up. They have some of these, specifically LeVert, when he comes up later, this team, and Jared Allen too. These team could end up looking very expensive. It's something you worry about down the line. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about the way the East is sort of starting to shake out through the rest of the league with some of these other moves. We could talk a little bit about the Knicks fans and where their state of mind is right now, and then we'll kind of close it off with some general thoughts. I'll take a quick break.